If you're looking for a secure haven within the literary world, you found the perfect organization. Let's make magic together. Our space is specifically designed for African American authors who are passionate about their writings of films and books. It's a platform to stay informed about industry developments. And on Patreon, we'll share exclusive content, valuable resources, and engaging discussions and masterclasses on various subjects, ranging from film and publishing industry trends to wellness and business tips. So if you're ready to dive into this exciting community, become a member now. Welcome to our literary haven where creativity knows no bounds. Let's make magic together.
You are representing everybody that is you. I represent being able to find the light at the end of the tunnel.
You gotta really be in it and really enjoy it and really want it.
And I feel like if you come into it like that day one, man, you unstoppable.
That shows people it's possible, my people, that it's possible.
And that is so necessary in a world of misinformation. This is a legacy effort.
Thank you for joining me for this workshop put on by We Are AAMBC. I'm grateful to them for another opportunity to put on another workshop. For this one, I'll be sharing on the topic of storytelling as a liberatory praxis, how storytelling frees and heals us. My name is Bree. I'll be your facilitator for this workshop. I can be found on social media as @BreeBreeReads. I am an educator. I am the owner of Sankofa Books. I'm also a PhD student pursuing my doctoral degree in English. So the topic for this workshop stems from a paper that I recently wrote for one of my last classes in my PhD program. The title of this paper was The Liberatory Praxis of Testimony, the Testimonial Narrative as Resistance and Reclamation in Black Literature. In the paper, I wanted to highlight the transformative power of storytelling, specifically in Black literature, how telling our stories not only heals us as individuals, but also as a community. This is a matter that's near and dear to my heart as a writer, as a lover of words, as an avid reader, and as a literacy advocate. In my paper, I focus on the testimonial narrative in Black literature. These are stories that tell about life experiences. These testimonial narratives are a vital liberatory praxis in Black literature. As acts of counter-storytelling, these narratives confront and dismantle the intergenerational violence of systemic oppression. Through the communal act of storytelling and bearing witness, stories, identity, and autonomy are reclaimed as silence is replaced with the power of testimony that forges the path to freedom. What this means is when we tell our stories, we are in control and we can revoke false narratives and generalized monoliths. When people come across my social media or we run into each other and they ask me about my love for reading, they usually ask what started me getting into books and where did my love for books and reading come from? And I always start with Maya Angelou's I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings. The whole reason for this paper, I've spent so much time trying to figure out how I can put my passion for literature and literary studies and how I can marry that with my passion and my interest in Black studies. And storytelling was always at the crux of that. And I use I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings as an example, not only for my love for storytelling, but how telling our stories can be a tool for liberation, because her story had a huge, major impact on me. The first time I read I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings, I was really young. I was in elementary school, and I always tell this story. But I was not only blown away by, of course, she was writing beautifully, and she was telling of these major life experiences, but I'm always blown away by the stories that she shares and the way that she tells her stories as an older woman, looking back on who she was as a younger woman and all the things that happened to her, things that were terrible, things that were great. She ended up being a teenage mother and kind of in a really tough position with her own family. And as she's an older woman writing the story of her younger self, she tells it with such grace and she tells it with so much forgiveness of herself, and she doesn't look back on her stories and her failings as and holding any shame when she writes about it. And for me, that blew me away, and that was really healing for me. And I experienced, just through reading her story, I experienced a form of liberation for myself, something that I hope I can provide access to for my students in my classroom in the texts that we read. So that's kind of where this topic came from. I'm always looking for ways to kind of combine my love for literature and my love for Black studies together, and they always meet at storytelling. So this is kind of what I want to share about today. So in my paper, I break down storytelling into kind of two components, and that is testimony and bearing witness. And I further break it down into three outcomes. And some of those outcomes are reclaiming the reclamation of identity, the assertion of autonomy, and healing and liberation. So two major components of storytelling in Black literature are testimony and bearing witness. And these are terms that we often hear associated with the church, specifically the Black church. Maybe not since I've been alive that I've experienced, but I have heard of like the older generations talking about like testimony in church. You stand up, you give your testimony, and everybody around you bears witness to what you have shared that the higher power has done in your life. Storytelling is just us giving our testimony, testifying of our experiences. And on the other hand, as we're telling our story, we're giving our testimony. On the other side of that is bearing witness. When we bear witness, we are listening to another story. We are validating their experience and we are affirming their humanity as we respond with "me too" or "I hear you and I see you." When reading and writing about this concept, I'm reminded of that philosophical question about if a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, did it really fall? So storytelling is not only putting us in control of our own stories, but we're setting ourselves free, we're setting each other free, and we're building community through that. Thus, storytelling brings healing, especially in the Black community. When we tell our own stories, we get free. That's the whole point. That's what I'm trying to highlight. Okay. Counter storytelling is a major part of storytelling as a tool for liberation. Reclaiming our identity requires us fighting against the dominant culture's perception of us. Self-authorship is just us writing and telling our own stories, but that ensures that we right the wrongs of the false narratives that have been told about us. It's like thinking about the TV, the music, the films, all the forms of media that are created about the Black experience without anybody in the production room or the creation process who is actually Black. There's a major difference between those form like productions and the ones where we are actually in the room. So for my paper, I kind of anchored my paper around two texts, and they're both testimonial narratives. When I use the term testimonial narrative, a testimony is just a person testifying of their experience, and a narrative is, of course, a story. So testimonial narratives can be autobiographies, they can be memoirs, and I centered my paper around two. The first one being Frederick Douglass's autobiography or slave narrative, titled the Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, written by himself. And the other text is Toni Morrison's Beloved. Of course, Frederick Douglass's narrative is autobiographical, so it's a work of nonfiction, whereas Beloved is a work of fiction, but it's based in historical events. So for Frederick Douglass in his narrative, okay, literacy is the key that unlocks his ability to put words to his oppressed condition and challenges a system of dehumanization that labeled him as property. His narrative is this essential testimony that exposes the morally corrupt practice of slavery. By telling his story, he shapes his identity outside of his master's definition and uses his life as a primary example in his fight for abolition. By telling his own story, his testimony, Douglass positions himself as the ultimate authority of his religious and political experience through his self authorship and self definition. His narrative is ultimately a rhetorical testimony. His narrative is the perfect model of storytelling as a liberatory praxis for the self and the community for generations to come. In his narrative, he writes about his determination to become literate, his determination to learn to read and write. And this kind of process that he goes through as far as storytelling, he first decides that he's going to learn to read and write. And he becomes so determined to do that because he overhears his master tell the master's wife, that she needs to stop teaching the enslaved children to read and write, because once they become literate, then that gives them too much power. They become too aware of who they are. They're going to start to recognize that this is wrong, everything that's going on this plantation. And so he overhears that conversation. And from that point, he determines that he's going to learn to read and write. So from a very young age, he learns that there's power in words, there's power in writing, there's power in knowledge. And that kind of starts his journey as a storyteller. Throughout his narrative, of course, he's sharing with his readers all the terrible things he experiences on the plantation, being beaten, being starved, witnessing his aunt being beat and whipped to within inches of his life. He's sharing about this spiritual awakening experience that he has even on the plantation. He talks about some of the beauty that he saw in the part of the country where he was. And he finishes up his narrative speaking to us, the reader, speaking to us as if he knew that centuries and generations later we would be reading his story. And his intent for writing his story, his intent for becoming literate, was to tell about everything that was going on the plantation. His intent of becoming literate and becoming a storyteller was to expose the evils of the plantation and the institution of slavery. And he did that, as he explains in his narrative, he did that so that it can be exposed and the wrongs can be corrected and people can know about what's going on. At the time, he was convinced that part of the reasons nobody had come to abolish this terrible practice of slavery was because so many people were unaware of what was really taking place on these plantations. So he wrote it down to expose it. He wrote it down to make other people aware. And of course, as we know, he devoted the rest of his life's work to abolishing slavery. So this is the best example that I can think of storytelling as a tool for liberation. It exposes what harms. It makes everybody else aware of what's wrong so that we can pool resources together to fight against that which is wrong. And I just feel like slave narratives in general are what we need to look to when we think about storytelling as a liberation tool. Okay, so my love for his story and my love for his devotion to becoming literate, and a lot of what he explains in his narrative is kind of what kickstarted this whole idea of this paper, and it really helped me fine tune why I value storytelling so much. Alongside, Maya Angelou's autobiography, and of course, Beloved, which I'm going to speak about a little bit next. So another testimonial narrative that I use to anchor my paper is Toni Morrison's Beloved. Though it's a fictional narrative, like I said before, it is based on historical events. Narratives such as Beloved and Frederick Douglass's narrative function as corrective lenses. They reframe imposed false narratives and dismantle oppressive dogma. Communal storytelling is a critical tool for transcending the past in order to reclaim the self for the future. Remembering through storytelling and testimony allows the oppressed, it allows us to reclaim what has been denied, our identities, our bodies, and our agency. Memory, reclamation, and healing create the foundation for the fight for liberation. And far more than just historical accounts of true events, these narratives like these slave narratives and autobiographies, poetry, song, music, a tweet, a post, these are exemplars of counter storytelling that confront and dismantle the violence of systemic oppression that has caused so much harm generation after generation in the Black community. Recently, I played Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's TED Talk on the dangers of a single story in my classroom for my students. She said, "Stories matter. Many stories matter. Stories have been used to dispossess and to malign, but stories can also be used to empower and to humanize. Stories break the dignity of a people, but stories can also repair that broken dignity." This is something that I want to ensure that each student who passes through my classroom knows before they leave it for good. In that same TED Talk, she mentions a text by John Locke, who wrote about Africa as this one generalized idea. And in this text, in this diary that he kept, and he ended up coming back and publishing, and it spread far and wide across the US, he wrote that the people who were there on the continent, they ate each other, and they were basically beasts walking around, and their eyes were in places that they wouldn't be normally, and they had like different anatomy and stuff, and painted a really terrible picture, animalistic picture of what an African is. And of course, we know today that, Africa and people who come from the continent are definitely positioned in this false narrative, and a whole monolith has been created for an entire continent made up of 54 countries. And so she's talking about this in her TED Talk, and my students are listening. And this is something that storytelling fights against. It fights against the stereotypes and the monoliths. It fights against, taking one person's misappropriation and causing it to become an absolute truth and just this framework or this lens through which we view certain people from certain communities. And so storytelling, when we tell our own stories and we're in control of our own stories, then we can control our perception, how we are being perceived by others, or if that's even something that we want to we can just create for ourselves aside from the perception of the outside. So this is why I deeply value storytelling. A lot of the times when I say the term storytelling, people think about story time on the carpet when you're in elementary school. But of course, that's not what I mean. Here, now that we are in 2026 now, storytelling looks like the use of social media. It looks like blogs, it looks like tweets, it looks like social media posts, it looks like TikTok videos. It can be writing our own books and self-publishing. It can be essays, it can be articles, it can be any form of art that tells our stories of who we are and tells of our wide and varied experiences. And it doesn't just always have to be the story of struggle, even though that's true and that's valid as well. Storytelling is deeply critical for the Black community. The more we tell our stories, the more we can erase the false narratives, the more we can show the world that we are more than just victims, that we are more than just this one idea of failure. And success for us looks many ways, and love for us looks a lot of different ways. And to achieve and to pursue, these are things that we experience as well. So that's why I really wanted to share and have this workshop. And I'm going to continue to research and write about this. And this is actually the topic that I want to pursue for my dissertation. So wish me luck. Thank you so much for listening. I do want to finish up with one more thing. We have to keep telling our stories. The ultimate act of asserting human agency is storytelling. Replacing forced silence with the power of testimony demonstrates that reclamation of one's own narrative is the beginning of liberation. The tradition of testimony is not just intended for remembering the trauma of the past, but also for forming an identity, a spirituality, and a sovereignty destroyed by the chains of oppression in pursuit of a liberated future. Finally, this is where you can find me, and I hope we can connect. If you're watching on Instagram and Twitter, you can find me as at Bree Reads. I'm newly on TikTok as at Read with Bree. This link will take you to the links of the books that I have written. It will take you also to some things that I do with my business, Sankofa Books. Sankofa Books is an online bookstore and a literary agency. I help writers edit, proofread, develop, plan, and publish their written works. On the bookstore side, I sell books that celebrate the voices of Black writers. And there's the link right there to my website and also my business email. So if you have some time, please look me up, reach out to me, send me a message. I hope this workshop made sense. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope it was engaging. I hope you watch it again and send it to your friends. I appreciate, again, we are AAMBC for this opportunity to give another workshop. Thank you.
In a world where creativity meets the digital age, one agency stands out from the rest. Welcome to Delphine Legacy Media. We are a team of passionate experts and creatives dedicated to elevating your brand to new heights.
I learned so much today. It was really inspiring hearing everyone speak about all their different experiences and getting together like authors and screenwriters. And I learned a lot from this.
Their creativity and expertise are second to none. But what sets us apart? We tailor our services to fit your unique needs. Whether you're an author, a business owner, or an artist, our services include interviews, media tours, book tours, and speaking engagements, all designed to put your brand in the spotlight. Are you an artist that seeks to obtain more media, headline your own book tour, or adapt a film? Or perhaps you need media training to best prepare yourself. Whatever it may be, we can manage it. Picture your brand in the limelight. Picture your brand in the limelight. Your vision realized. At Delphine Legacy Media, we're partners in your success. Ready to take your brand to the next level? Contact us today. Delphine Legacy Media, where creativity meets success.